Yes. Well, I'm going to try a bit better than that. I came to interfaith relations as a very young rabbi more than 40 years ago in South Africa. It was the height of apartheid, the iniquitous racial separation on the part of the authorities there, and it was clear to me, as surely I thought it should be, to every person of faith or spiritual sensitivity, that one needed to do whatever one could to combat this racial separation and persecution. And one of the few ways you could do it at that time without immediately being thrown into jail or kicked out of the country, as eventually more or less I was through interreligious engagement. So I came to interfaith relations out of a commitment to social justice. I knew my tradition told me that the right thing to do is to be just and righteous, and therefore I had to find a way to do that. And I started hawking my wares around the different religious leaders, saying, you know, your eminence, bishop, sheikh, imam, the things that bring us together are so much more important than things that keep us apart. And generally speaking, they agreed and expressed their desire to be part of ongoing engagement. I knew in the South African context that if I didn't involve the Dutch Reformed Church as well, it would be of limited significance, because the Dutch Reformed Church represented the Afrikaner dominant political entity within South Africa at the time. It was known sometimes jocularly as the Nationalist Party at prayer. And so I heard of a dominee, a Dutch Reformed minister, downtown Cape Town, who was having dialogue with Catholics. I don't suppose that's terribly significant to you, but at that time, for a Reformed minister to have dialogue with Catholics was very significant. And I thought to myself, if he's talking to Catholics, maybe he'll talk to a Jew too. So I picked up the phone and I made an appointment, and he graciously received me. And I started with the same thing. I said, Dumini, you know, the things that bring us together are more important than the things that keep us apart. And he paused for a moment, and then he replied to me with a very heavy South African accent. Well, to tell you the truth, Rabbi, I cannot agree with you. Because the most important thing in my life keeps us apart. That is my life in Jesus as my personal Redeemer. You do not share that, Rabbi, therefore I have to tell you the truth, Rabbi, you are going to burn in hell. And it is my duty as a good Christian to save you. So fortunately, I didn't lose my cool, even though I was very young, wet behind the ears. I said to him, well, Dominique, thank you for your honesty. I still think it's very important for us to get to know one another. I want you to try to understand me, and I would like to understand you better. But Dominique, now you have to come to our meetings, because I'm giving you the opportunity to convert me. And he did come along to our meetings, and he did become less doctrinaire. And if I can mix my denominational metaphors, he did stop pontificating. And it was a very salutary experience for me. It taught me a lot, that engagement. But as I got involved, and indeed, it's led the way. After that, I became Chief Rabbi of Ireland. In Ireland, as a predecessor of mine said, 95% of the country is Catholic, 5% is Protestant, and I'm Chief Rabbi of the rest. But of course, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, because incidentally, my wife and I, we lived in Jerusalem, we live in Israel, and Ireland is the only country in the whole of the Jewish diaspora to have given Israel both a Chief Rabbi and a President. But at any rate, you can't do your job as a Chief Rabbi of Ireland if you're not involved in interfaith relations, and therefore it was very a natural development. But this engagement in the field of meeting other faiths was for me not only exciting, but I realized terribly important. The first thing I discovered was these people were amazingly ignorant about me. They didn't know what Jews were really, and they had all kinds of perceptions about Judaism that were completely wrong. I assume if you're a Christian, you must know the Jewish roots of your Christianity. How can you be a Christian and not know Judaism? Most of them knew nothing whatsoever, and the Muslims even more so. They were amazingly ignorant about me. But you know what? As I met them and spoke to them, I realized I was amazingly ignorant about them too. And I had all misconceptions. And I realized how important it was for us to engage one another, because if you want to be understood, you need to understand. This was very important knowledge that I took away when we left both South Africa and Ireland. Incidentally, things improved enormously when we left South Africa and when we left Ireland. In fact, places generally improve when we leave. There is now a move to get us out of Jerusalem in the hope that it might improve things in the places. But seriously, as I got involved and met these people, I discovered magnificent human beings who were not only magnificent as individuals, but they were magnificent in the sense of the divine in their lives. And I realized first and foremost that if our religious heritage, biblical heritage, teaches that the human being is created in the divine image, and that therefore every true human encounter is an encounter with the divine, how much more so when it is an encounter with the other who senses the divine in her or his world. It was enormously enriching. But there was another epiphany for me. It had never occurred to me before. I assumed my religion was right. I didn't even bother to think about other religions, really. But it suddenly dawned on me that if God has created us in all our diversity and relates to us in our diverse reality, there must be diverse ways of relating to God. No one religion can encapsulate the totality of the divine. God is more than any one religion. And that became obvious to me, that in encountering people from different religious backgrounds, I was experiencing the beauty of the divine presence beyond my own heritage. And if I experienced such goodness, then why was it that I was led up to believe, by commonplace media assumptions and you find widespread, that religion was part of the problem? It didn't seem to me to be like part of the problem at all. Indeed, as I reflected on it more, I realized that the idea that religion is the source of violence in our world in recent history is, of course, quite nonsensical. The vast majority of violence in the 20th century was done by secular forces. 2 world wars, Nazism, Stalinism, Pol Pot, all secular ideologies. And yet, of course, there have been and still are terrible things done in the name of religion. What are the reasons for that? Well, there are complex reasons. There was a great Jewish thinker of the 11th century, called Yehuda Halevi, who believed that the problem was power. And that when power is connected to religion, religion will always be prostituted and perverted. But sometimes we see terrible things done precisely by the powerless, who do not have any sense of security. I wrote an article for the Ring of Peace publication that was provided for all the participants in the conference, suggesting that insecurity and fear is a critical factor in the perversion of religion and manipulation of religion. The vast majority of conflicts in the world that are called religious today are not religious. Whether it was in Sri Lanka, or whether it's in Kashmir today, or whether it's in the Middle East between Israelis and Palestinians, or Northern Ireland between Catholics and Protestants, not really religious wars. These are territorial wars that involve people with identities. And those identities are rooted within cultures and religions, which therefore are exploited in the context of those conflicts. But all of this begs the question, what can we do to make sure that religion is what it should be, and that religion can express the beauty and the diversity of the divine and enrich humanity rather than being a tool for conflict? And I believe it's precisely what I experience that is the answer to that. We can only demonize one another, as indeed Laila described from us so beautifully. We can only demonize one another, we can only stereotype one another when we really do not know one another. That is the importance of the statement of the prophet Malachi 13:6, about how important God believes it is that we talk to one another. That is the importance of the statement in the Quran, chapter 47, verse 13, if I'm not mistaken, to know one another. When we truly know one another and we can encounter one another, each as a child of God, each created in the divine image, then we can no longer stereotype and demonize one another as we may have done in the past. There was a wonderful Lutheran bishop of Stockholm by the name of Christa Stendhal. He had 3 guidelines for interfaith relations. The one was always seek to know the other as the other knows herself or himself. Don't try to identify the other according to third-party categorizations. Get to know the other. He added, always seek to view the other community by the best within it. Don't define it by the worst within it. But his 3rd rule was a wonderful idea. He said, leave room for holy envy. It's a beautiful concept. It's wonderful when we meet and we say, you have that, we have that too. Isn't that nice? That's wonderful. We can celebrate those commonalities. But there is nothing disloyal to your tradition to be able to meet somebody from another religious heritage and say, wow, there is something beautiful in that tradition that is special to that tradition. How glorious that is. This is precisely as was mentioned in terms of the opening presentations, I think, by President Steinmeier. To go beyond tolerance, to reach to celebration. When we can celebrate a world of diversity, then we can benefit from a world of diversity. Those who want to eliminate differences are not doing any service to our world. Our world would be very dull if it was totally monochromatic, if there were no identities, no cultures. Simply because something is abused does not make it invalid. Because religion is abused and is often part of the problem does not mean that it is not the solution. Just because the family is abused and there is such a thing as a mafia doesn't mean that we should do away with families. Because there is gluttony doesn't mean that we should do away with food. Because there is prostitution doesn't mean we have to do away with sexual intimacy. It is how you use things that is critically important. And religion is a blessing when we can celebrate one another. Do I have another minute or have I overstepped my time? 1 minute. So 1 minute I'm going to come back to a wonderful emblem of many of our traditions. Certainly Islam and Christianity and Judaism all see themselves as descended from Abraham. And Abraham within our traditions is emblematic of this important quality of hospitality. Hospitality is a key factor in enabling people to feel that they are part of a society and that they can contribute to a society. The Bible tells in chapter 18 of Genesis of how Abraham was waiting at his tent for visitors. In fact, the Midrash, the homiletical tradition of Judaism, describes his tent as being rolled up on all 4 sides so that he wouldn't miss anybody passing, so that he could offer hospitality. And then the Bible says there in chapter 18 of the book of Genesis, and he lifted up his eyes and he saw, and 3 men were standing there. And of course afterwards he discovers these are angelic messengers. And then the next chapter, 2 of them have to go on to Sodom and Gomorrah to warn against the impending destruction of a society that's completely corrupted and destroyed its inner being. And to save Lot, to save the just that are still there. And that chapter opens with the words, and 2 angels came to Sodom. A great Hasidic rabbi asked the question, why are they identified as angels in this chapter when they go to Sodom? But for Abraham, it just says 3 men were standing there. And he answered, because Abraham didn't need to be told they were angels. Because Abraham saw the angel in every human being. And that is our challenge. Our challenge is to see the angel in every human being. And when we see the angel in every human being, then the blessings of our heritage, the blessings of our tradition, are not only the solution for humanity, they are the guarantee of a world of true harmony, peace, and joy. Thank you.